In this video, we're going to take a look at dimensioning. So dimensioning is a 2D annotation command in Revit. And what I mean by 2D annotation is that it is view specific. So if I create dimensions in a floor plan view, they will not be available in the enlarged floor plan. If I had a dimension going, in this view going here to here, it would not show up in the callout. It's not going to show up in any of your elevations or sections or anything like that. So they are view specific. While what you do with the dimensions and how you use them to control model elements can affect the model elements in the views, you will not see the dimensions in any other view except the one you create them in. So to create them, I'm going to go to my Annotate tab. And really the important thing, anything on this Annotate tab is 2D, which means it's view specific. So I'm going to start with the dimensions here over on the left. I typically use the aligns for everything. I find that the linear dimension, the line can do everything the linear dimension can and can do it better. So we're going to use the aligned dimension command. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it to start. Now the dimensions host to model elements, and they can host to 2D elements as well, but that's for another time. But for now, you'll see when I'm hovering here in the window, I can't just click an outer space here on nothing. I have to be over an actual object to click to place. You'll see by default, it's going to the wall center line, and that's because of this option here. Some firms and disciplines do dimension to center line, some dimension to face of stud. So it really varies based on where you're working for what the dimensioning style is, or the type of work that you're doing. But I typically go to face of wall, so I'm going to switch it to wall faces here. Now you'll see as I hover here in the window that it's trying to go to either side of the wall as opposed to that center line. So we're going to start with just our individual references, and then we're going to move into the option of entire walls here. But to start, this is just individual references. It's going to allow me to start a chain of dimensions. And the chain of dimensions is important. So once I click here to start one, I'll go from the outside wall to outside wall. And then I'm going to click to on the other outside of the wall here. You can see that where the dimensions hosted is showing as blue. And then I'm going to come up here, I'm going to pull the dimension up above my cursor. I'm just moving my cursor around right now. And then I'm going to click to place. So you can see I'm still in the command right now. So Revit is in the default that I would want to create a chain of dimensions. Since I only want a one dimension, I'm just going to make sure I click over here where there is no other element to place. All right, so now I'm going to do another one to locate this interior wall. All right, so that's going to be 3 clicks across. All right, so that's a chain of dimensions there. If I'm hovering over another element when let's say I want to finish this dimension string here, but I'm actually over that window, if I click on it, you see what happens, that it just becomes another dimension string. I can always edit that. Again, it's hosted or shown as blue. If I click on it again, it will unhost it. So you can do that when you're in the command still, or hit modify to exit that command. At any point in time, you can modify a dimension string. If I click on it and hit edit witness lines, you can add or remove elements to that dimension line or chain. All right, I'm going to do one more here, starting from that outside edge. I'm going to go ahead and locate these openings. Again, it's kind of a preference, some dimension to the center line of doors and windows, others dimension to the exterior widths. I'll go ahead and do the center line for this one for the purposes of taking a look at this quickly. All right, so I can really quickly lay out these dimensions. Now in Revit, you can actually use the dimensions to control the locations of the model elements. So let's say this dimension is supposed to be 3 feet and all these other dimensions are supposed to be 6'3" on center. So, and on center just means on the center of the element. All right, so if this is supposed to be 3 foot, if I click on this door, you see how both these dimensions went blue? That means I can edit them. So I could type in 3 foot. And then now that dimension is correct. So if the rest of these need to be 6'3", I need to change all of them. So it might be really tempting at this point in time to click in here and say 6'3". Oh, also when you're typing in these dimensions, Revit by default, the unit is in feet. So if I said just like 6 like that, it would default to 6 foot. If I say 6 space 3, it's going to read that as feet space inches. All right, so you don't have to spend the time going in and doing the appropriate actual annotations there. It doesn't matter. If I just type in the 6'3", Revit's going to read that accordingly. But you'll see what happened here when I put in that 6'3". Now I messed up my 3 foot dimension that I had. So in order to avoid that, I want to make sure that I put in the 3 foot. All right, now I know the door location is solid from the edge of the wall, so I need to go down the rest of the wall. All right, so instead of, I'm going to deselect the door, and then to adjust this dimension, instead of using the door, I'm going to use the window. So I click on the window, then I'm going to make that 6'3". Again, might seem really tempting to punch in 6'3" there, but that's going to mess up that dimension. All right, because it's a chain, and that's you know, dimensions all the way across. So I know that 6'3" is good. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to go here. Deselect, next window. All right, so if you're going down a chain like this and you have to equal these out, you know, just make sure that you're tracking which one you're working from. It can be really easy to want to, you know, go back and forth with these. Okay, so that is just placing them as individual references. This is a pretty small building, but you can see how if you had a lot of elements that might take some time. And in particular too, if you were doing the widths where you would have to come in here and go off of the widths, make sure you're hitting all the right lines, you know, et cetera, that starts to add up, right? So Revit has made that even easier for you. So if instead of individual references, I say entire walls, I have different options here on what I want to dimension. So let's go through each one here. If I go to openings, I go to centers. Now, if I click on this, and I'm just going to click on the wall only. I click on the wall, it dimensions it all the way across. So same thing down here. All right, and that's going to the center line. If you prefer to have it by widths, I can click on widths. And then that would give me the dimensions by width. I'm going to just delete these just for clarity because it's getting messy, just so you can see what it looks like for the widths. So it very quickly allows you to dimension across these walls. It also will let me do, let's undo widths and do intersecting walls. So I do intersecting walls and click here, and it's going to locate any of the walls hitting that one wall. Okay. What else do we have here? Our options. We haven't talked about grids yet, so we'll just have covered those two, and that's good there. You can also type in text into a dimension string. So let's go ahead and I'm going to double click on the text. Oh, you can also do leaders. If I drag this little blue dot, it's going to automatically generate leaders. If you don't like them, you can turn them off, but they're normally helpful. Normally you want those on. And then I can add text here. If this is selected, I click on the text. You can replace text, but it has to have actual text in it. It can't just be an override on the number. We always want our model to be as accurate as possible. And then you can add text like a VIF for verifying field. Maybe this is a typical, something like that, but you can add text in those dimension strings. You can also create new types of dimension strings. If I go up here to select the, similar to how you would do a window or a wall, we go select the element, go up to edit type. I'm going to immediately hit duplicate, that way I don't mess up the other ones. Let's call this. There's a lot of information up here with the witness lines and the leader type and all that sort of stuff. I tend to not mess with this stuff a lot. I'm just going to move down here. We have a color here. And then the text size and the font are the ones that I would normally be adjusting. So, and you do have a width factor. So that's going to be like the kern on your font spacing between the letters. But you do have different options here. We'll go with something that we can tell the difference. That should work. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. And there you go. So you can see a new dimension type. So because we duplicated it, it did not affect these other dimension strings that are already here. Those are the linear 3/32 aerial. But if I did want to switch any of them, I now have that type created. That was my linear 1/8. And I don't think that's what the text size is. I think I did, oh, I did do 1/8, okay. But you'll see that once you have that type created, you can then switch out whatever dimensions are needed to that type. A couple other things on the dimensions. Let's see if I can use them to, oops, I'm still in the entire walls command. Switch that back to individual references. You may even notice as I'm placing these dimensions, I'm just going to delete this guy, that I do get this equals control. So that's going to help me equal out items automatically. So you can see right now this is 8'2", 8'6", 6'8". So if I wanted these two windows centered between this wall and this wall, I can set up this dimension and I can say equals, and it's automatically going to move those model elements for me. Now, it's only, it's just going to show the equals here. If I were to move one of these windows, it's going to give me an error because that equals creates a constraint. So at this time, I could say the remove constraint, which would then break that constraint and that lock. Or, I could keep it and say, oh, you're right, thank you. I messed up on that. But one of the cool things about this is, let's say this wall moves. It's keeping that constraint of keeping these elements equal within that space. So you can see it spreading out. Whoops, I put the door in the window. You can see it adjusting according to that. Similar to that, you can set up a lock. I would just say with this, just be careful, use it sparingly, make sure that you know it's there. If you delete the dimension string, you can choose to unconstrain it and get rid of it, or you can actually say okay as well and keep the constraint. So that just gets tricky because you might have forgotten about it, and without the annotation, you might forget about it entirely. You'll see when you click on one of the walls or the windows that it's kind of giving you a preview reminding you about it. But I would say just be careful, when you delete those dimensions if you don't unconstrain. Similarly, there is a capability to lock a dimension. So let's say I lock this dimension. That means if this wall moves, then that wall moves, and vice versa. So it's locking those two together. Whoops, right outside the crop region. Let's adjust that. So just be really, cautious of that. The locking can be very handy if you have like a set clearance or something like that you need to maintain. But again, it can be easy to forget about. And so just be aware of that, because if I have this constraint here and I move this wall, because this wall needs to move for other reasons or the thickness changes or something, that might impact my exterior building footprint, so that's just something to be cautious of. There are also angular dimensions. So if that wasn't 90 degrees, let's say maybe this wall is here. Oh, see, there's that lock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm gonna remove it. All right, so there's that 78. Similarly, you can adjust this, select the element and adjust. Just when it comes to the dimensions, especially for walls, I find that if I want to adjust this 75 here, the default, your thought would be to go to this wall here, but actually you want to go to one of the walls that the dimension string is hosted to. So I want to go to one of the exterior walls, and then I could type in, let's say 100, and it's gonna affect that. You'll notice that dimension went away. That's because it went outside the crop region. So once the model element goes outside of it, then the dimension, the annotation automatically disappears as well. I can just adjust the crop region, bring that back here. We do also have radial and diameter. Let's go ahead and build a couple more walls. Use the circle command here and here. So those are really straightforward. Just select it, click on what you want to dimension, second to place. Go to diameter as well. All right, first to start, second to place. All right, and that covers the basics on our dimensions.